Okay, well, let's start then. So welcome everybody to Best Foot Forward, the Essex and Ipswich CIPD branches webinar for today. We thought this was a particularly pertinent subject because sadly we are hearing about a lot of redundancies, and so we thought it was a good opportunity to take the time to review the best way of presenting ourselves on paper and online. And in part 2 next month we'll look at interview techniques. So whether you are finding yourself in the position of looking for a new role at work, or you're wanting to support other people that you're having to either downsize your business or make redundant, and you want to provide a good experience of them leaving your company, bearing in mind it has a great impact on the image of a company when things turn up again, and we want to recruit. We hope we will find this really practical with lots of insights. So just a few, here we are, just a few housekeeping points. So you're all on silent, and if you can leave that, that would be great. We're going to use the chat box for comments and questions. So do please put all your comments and questions in as we go through. We will pick those up and use the Q&A session at the end. Please ensure the name you're showing on your Zoom account is the name you booked with. This is because we do want to make sure we don't admit people to the meeting that perhaps shouldn't be here. The session's being recorded, so you will also receive a link to this after the event, and the contact details for all of our speakers will be in the chat box at the end of the session. Okay. Finally, there will be a survey at that we'll send you after the meeting to ask you for feedback on today's webinar and also for any future ideas. So hopefully that answers some crucial questions. So who are your panel? Well, my own name, that I'm Amanda Whiteford. I'm the chair of the Essex branch committee for Southend and Chelmsford, and I'm chairing today. And I have with me Daryl Hughes from Whitelist Talent, Jennifer Livings from Silk Helix, Dawn Weddell from our branch, Emma Cannon from Reed Global, and Pete Bowery from the CIPD branch. So welcome to our speakers. Thank you everybody for giving your time today. So let's kick off with our first speaker, and Dawn, over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm just going to start really thinking about what you as an individual. So this is really focused if you are thinking of changing jobs, whether you've just been made redundant. My colleagues will talk about how you help others in this situation, but I thought I'd talk about you first. So one of the things to ask yourself is, where am I now? Do you have a career path? If you have a career path, what's your goal? And if you haven't got a career path, how can I get one? How do I know what I want? And maybe something like a mentor, maybe something that you might want to think about to help explore those options. Some of the other things, what do you like about and dislike about your current job role, assuming you are in work? No job's perfect. You know, think about what's within your circle of influence. Write a pros and cons list of what you like and what you don't like. So it gives you a flavour of actually what is it I like in my workplace? What don't I like about it? And I'm not talking about, you know, day-to-day tasks. It may be more tangible and untangible stuff around the softer side of things. So the way people interact with people, the way I'm treated. Another thing to consider is proactive or reactive HR. More and more organisations, I think, are now still are reactive HR. There's very few that are proactive, that see HR as embedded in their culture and something they want to embrace. They still see it as the person to come in and sort out a problem. So for me, think about, what is it you prefer? Do you prefer being proactive, getting in there, talking to managers, giving them the skills to deal with things so that you don't get ER issues? Or are you a person that absolutely loves ER issues? If you love ER, then think about what kind of organisation you want to go into. Just because it's a HR manager or a HR officer role, what kind of organisation are you going into? Professional service, for instance, if you love ER, you're not going to get a lot of ER type work in, say, a surveyor's or a financial institute. There will be some, but not as much as if you say you're in a care home type environment. So think about, what is it I like? And then for me, what is it that drives you? Is it money? Is it a sense of doing something good or working on a bigger picture? What are your values? Are people central to your work, or are you more procedural driven? Look for an organisation that aligns to your values. So if you're very people driven, and most people, HR people are, but not all are, look for organisations that have got awards for investing in people, or that portray a very supportive environment on their social media or their websites. Some of the other things that you might want to ask yourself, well, yeah, money is important because we all go to work for money, but is there something other than money that drives me? Is it the feeling of doing something good? And if that's the case, maybe look at a different sector to what you're currently in, maybe the charity sector, where there's a sense of the whole organisation doing something good. Some of these questions you might struggle with. As I said, I've mentioned before, maybe you'd like to look at getting a mentor. We are going to be doing some stuff later in CIPD about rolling out mentors, which may help. But some of the other things you might want to look at is psychometric testing. There's many on the market. They aren't cheap, but they can give you a sense of what ticks your boxes.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Dawn. That was really, really good session. Thank you. So moving on then, and building on really what Dawn was saying, I wanted to talk to you about energizing strengths. And I've got three key questions here for you to ask yourself. So the first one, and if you've got paper and pen to hand, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to answer this question. What are you good at? What do you bring to a job besides your technical expertise that you're really good at work? It could be that you're great with customers. It could be that you're great with numbers. It could be you're diplomatic. Just stop and think for a few seconds. What do you really bring to a team or a role at work that's special for you? Second question, when do you feel most energized at work? What's happening for you? So have a think about when you're feeling really great at work, you're really loving what you're doing. What's helping you feel really energized and really good? So why am I asking you these questions? Because successful careers are built on energizing strengths. And part of thinking about who you are, what you have to offer, and what you want from your next role, it's really important to focus on what it is that you bring to the party that's special to you. So as an example, if I were wanting to recruit a civil engineer, but I had issues with the project I was working on with neighbours or locals that weren't so keen on the project I was working on, I might decide I want a civil engineer who's really good with people. So for those civil engineers applying for the role that I'm looking for, I would be interested to know, what do they bring to the party? And the people that are telling me that they're good with being diplomatic, good with people issues, that they enjoy dealing with people and explaining the benefits of what they're doing, that would be an added bonus for me. So of the civil engineers that might be equally technically adept, I would then focus on that person. So if you know what you really enjoy, what you bring, you can emphasize that in your CV, in your profile on LinkedIn, to make yourself stand out from the crowd without dissing the competition, as it were. So it's a really good two questions to ask yourself. And there's a third question on there. Know your weaknesses so you can make the right choices. So just jot that down for yourself. Know your weaknesses, but I won't ask you to write anything else down. Come back to that after today's webinar when you're thinking about this. We're not encouraged to think about our weaknesses, but it's important we know what they are. And by weaknesses, I mean the sort of things that you've never really been terribly good at. And if you're really honest, you don't enjoy them and you're not much interested in being good at them. Because sometimes we are attracted to jobs with a higher element of those types of tasks and responsibilities than we might see at first glance, and inadvertently set ourselves up for failure. So it's important that you know what your weaknesses are, you know what your strengths are, and you make sure you play to your strengths and you minimize the weaknesses by managing them well. You mustn't abdicate responsibility, but you make the right choices. And that includes what to say no to as well as what to say yes to. So key thing from me, know your energizing strengths. Okay. Moving on, Daryl, over to you. Oh,
thank you, Amanda. So today I'm going to be talking about CVs and personal statements. I've got 10 minutes in total for this, so I'll try and keep it as concise and simple as possible. But it does mean that I can only briefly touch on these points. So firstly, how to produce a great looking CV. Generic HR professionals will produce generic CVs and personal statements. The world of HR, especially in Essex, has a hotbed of talent, which means if you want to set yourself apart from the crowd, you really need to capture the reader's attention immediately. A great CV and a personal statement is a great way to do it. So let's start with the CV. Your CV is designed to do one thing, to get you that interview. That means that every section of your CV must contain information of value and relevance to the advertised position. So I'm going to talk to you quickly about layout, and I didn't think I needed to, but I've seen some CVs recently where the layouts haven't been that great. So firstly, keep it relatively simple. So your name, top, middle, bold, and slightly larger than the rest of the font. The area you reside, you don't need to put your full address. I don't like seeing full addresses. It fears me with security concerns. Then your contact number and email, and make sure this is professional. One I see recently was Karaoke Queen 85, and which is fine if she's sending messages to her friends, but if you're going for a role somewhere, you want to make sure you keep this professional. Then you have your personal statement where that sets you apart. We're going to touch on that in a moment. Then we'll have education and qualifications. So this would typically be where you put your CIPD level 7, or if you're a psychology graduate with a 2-1, make sure that's there. If it's GCSEs, O levels, or A levels, make sure that's towards the bottom of the CV. You don't want to waste that space at the beginning where you really need to capture the reader's attention. We then have the skills section, and this is the part where I say to you that you can tailor this. So if you see a job spec and the first 3 bullet points are something that you've done, there's no reason why you can't put that on your skills as your first 3. Obviously write it in your own words, but it will enable the reader to see your CV and think, yes, this is exactly what we're looking for straight from the off. You then get onto the work history, and this section needs to be, you need to convince the potential employer of your suitability for the role. I always advise to do this in chronological order for most recent role first. So what you can have, your name of your company, and then a couple of additional points that I like seeing on CVs are size of the business, what industry they're in, potentially turnover, and how many people you may line manage. The next line would be the date. I've got to say that my personal preference is to see full dates. So for example, September 2017 rather than Sep 17. I personally feel that not writing the complete date shows a little bit of laziness. Not everyone will agree with that, but that's what I feel. And then your job title. If you've had multiple jobs, promotions internally, includes the dates of the promotions, because this will show your career progression as well within the organisation. Responsibilities for each role. So this will be in bullet point form. You have an achievement section. Emma from Reed's going to touch on that shortly, so I won't talk too much about it. But one thing I will say is I'm not a fan of trying to read over a CV that is paragraph after paragraph, and I know I'm not alone with this. So make sure you keep it in bullet point form, and try and get some figures in there. The more detail, the better for relevant jobs. The reader may not be a HR professional. You might have a finance director or a managing director that doesn't know everything you do and may have given themselves almost like a tick box exercise. So the more of them boxes you can get ticked, the more important, especially from your most recent role. Then towards the bottom of the CV, systems used. Lots of HR people seem to think that's just for payroll and finance professionals. Well, no, if you've got the systems used, if you've implemented a system, or just generally use any systems, include them. The employer that's reading your CV may be thinking about implementing a new system. And if you've got experience with that system, it's going to help you stand out and give you that extra little advantage over the rest of the competition that's out there. Last little bit, hobbies and interests. If you're applying for a senior position, then the fact that you've captained your local netball team and run training sessions will demonstrate your leadership and organisational ability. So make sure you've got that on there. Watching EastEnders, no one really cares about it, and you're actually wasting space on your CV where you can write really important information. Sorry, I'm looking at my slide and I've put things there that don't really marry up too much, but the professional or creative part, always keep it professional. You work in a professional body, we expect to see it professional. I believe if you keep your CV concise, neat and professional, it won't offend anyone. I know some clients who really dislike reading CVs that are on one page and it's got a photo and it's got your systems there and it all feels like it's crammed in almost to look modern. If you're a techie person or developer, yeah, that can work, but not necessarily with a HR CV. What not to include, sorry, I've got a timer to make sure I don't run over today. So what not to include, date of birth doesn't need to be on there. A photo of yourself, again, doesn't need to be on there. Your marital status doesn't need to be on there. Nationality, I've put nationality, but unless you're applying for a French-speaking HR business partner and you're a French national or you can speak the language, it doesn't need to be on there. Or like I see at the bottom, most references available on request. Again, it's a wasted space on your CV where you're missing an opportunity to market yourself. So I'm going to try and wrap up the CV part. So key points to remember: keep your CV as dynamic as possible. Your CV is designed to do one thing and get you an interview, yet the average hiring manager will only spend 30 seconds glancing at your CV. So you need to grab their attention and sell yourself really quickly. Spelling and grammar, it's again a little bit of laziness and lack of care, which no manager will want in their team. Never trust a computer spell check, and especially if you've got it on a US dictionary. The amount of times I see that, and you know, ask someone else in your household to look after it, your neighbor or someone you've worked with previously, or your recruiter. We're here to help you, so feel free to send CVs to us and ask us to look over it. Another thing I see, writing lots but saying nothing. I see that a lot with paragraphs, and that's why I ask people to put bullet points rather than long sentences. Employers aren't looking for you to explain everything you've ever done, so just get that there. I've got buzzwords, yeah, using cliche phrases like good communicator, works well in a team, without any hard evidence. You might as well write blah blah blah. No one really cares. Everyone's CV looks the same, so look at some key achievements you've done there. Finally, on the CV, make sure you've got the correct personal details. The amount of people that send me their CV and it's a number short, or they've put .com rather than .co.uk. Just make sure you got that, because you could have a great CV, but people might not be calling you because you haven't got the right details on there. I've gone over a little bit on the CV, so I'm going to whiz through the personal statement section. It's just important, but what I advise with is make a list of overused adjectives and then stay away from them. Focus on results rather than duties, and speak in first person. The aim is to highlight your professional attributes and goals, emphasizing why they should continue reading the rest of your CV. Aim to use no more than 50 to 150 at top, and making sure each sentence has a key selling point. Phrases such as looking for a challenging opportunity should be avoided, because they're not only focused on you as an individual, they're only focused on you as the individual. The employers want to know what you will do for them and how you will help their business. It should be clear from the job spec what they need. So tell them straight what you can help to do that. There are tons of HR professionals out there, more so than ever at the moment. So you really need to get across what sets you apart, what makes you different. Avoid the temptation of simply using a template and filling some bits and pieces in. This makes you look lazy, and employers are unlikely to continue reading it if they see the unoriginal phrases keep cropping up. Think carefully about what you offer the company. So this again, tailor your personal statement to the business you're applying for. Once you've looked at their website and you maybe check the person out on LinkedIn, there might be things that you can use to show why you're an excellent addition to their HR department, and make sure you use their company name rather than just your company. It will make a difference to the reader, and you want them to feel good and want them to call you and arrange an interview with you. So what I'll do for structuring a personal statement, I've got 45 seconds, so I'll try and do this quickly. I would say answer the following questions. Why does this role interest you? Why are you suited to this role? Do you have any previous jobs or training that relate to this line of work? Have you taken part of any projects that help demonstrate your capabilities? And what specialist skills do you have to make an ideal candidate? Once you've answered them, you have a better idea of what you can bring to the role. You can use these answers to determine the structure of your personal statement, identifying what to emphasize and what to downplay. Now, I'm going to miss the do's and don'ts because I just want to let you guys know. Look, it might sound like a time-consuming process, but the effort to tailor your CV to the job spec and to that company will set you apart from the other candidates that apply. I see a job that was advertised this morning. I checked it about an hour ago, and it had 250 applications. Okay, the majority of them would have been irrelevant, but make sure you stand out. Look, if you want some one-on-one help with these or another eye to read over your CV, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. I'll be more than happy to help. Thanks for all listening. I hope there's been some great points for you to take away, and I wish you the best of luck in your job search. I really do.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Daryl. That was a great snapshot of what we need to do. So moving on then to Emma, achievements and responsibilities.
Yeah, so thanks, Daryl. I was nodding along with a lot of that. Yeah, the amount of times I know about Susan, divorcee from Harlow, who's got 3 children, and yeah, we just don't need it. Like, it's lovely. You've got your personal profile to put in a bit of your personality, but all it does is allow people to discriminate. So yeah, I totally agree with everything Daryl said. So yeah, moving on to achievements versus responsibilities. So the achievements section, this is basically, it's your place to add value. So I'm going to go through the importance of featuring evidence-based achievements over the list of responsibilities that we put on a CV. Obviously, we absolutely need duties on your CV, but if they're listed as generic activities, you might as well just put a job description on there and not a CV. What you need to consider is your added value to the duties. So what I'd suggest is there's probably 3 separate places in the CV where you can put in your achievements. The first part is the personal profile. The second part is an actual achievements section, and the third part is as part of the career history. Obviously, you could call those employment history, or yeah, you don't have to put personal profile, you could put profile, but whatever sections that you choose to name them. So firstly, in your personal profile, choose the one thing that has had the biggest impact in your working career, or the thing that's been most recently relevant, or add it so it's tailored to the type of job you're going for. So for instance, you could put in there, your personal profile could be something like, I have gained valuable experience in human resources over the past 10 years at Reed, and have a particular wealth of experience and skills in employee relations, and I'm an MCIPD. My important achievements include working alongside the HR director to launch an updated equality and diversity policy. And then within that, you could go on to say how it's reduced sickness absence levels, or what cost effectiveness it's had on your business, and then finishing off with what you're seeking. So I am then seeking a role where I can utilize my ER skills, and so use that profile as the first part to put in your achievements. Secondly, moving on to the actual achievements, as the actual achievements section, as a general rule of thumb, 4 to 6 achievements is a good guide. But just remember, if they're quite lengthy to explain what the actual achievements are, you might want to reduce that down a little bit. But if they're self-explanatory, you can go, I think more is more, as long as they're all relevant. Also, please remember when using acronyms that are company specific. As a recruiter or a line manager, we might not know what they are. So just remember, like, we often see CVs that'll say something like exceeded the company CDF 3 times. And you're like, what is this CDF? Is this something I should know? And it turns out that it'll be a particular company target. So just bear that in mind, and you forget, because it comes such second nature to just drop in all the acronyms. So just make those changes to say exceeded the company income targets 3 times, or whatever it may be, just so we all understand what you're talking about. So with the work or employment history section, so your job description or a very similar job description is the actual perfect starting place to really focus on what your achievements are, because you can list, as I put in the slide, you can list your the duty and then move on from there to then elaborate within that duty. So yeah, obviously administered sickness absence, you know, what effect has that had on the company or the individuals? How has that made an impact and made for smarter working, more cost effective working? So just whatever they are. Obviously, some aspects of your job are just have to do's. You don't need to elaborate. So if part of your job is collecting the post each week, I don't think we really need to know about how you've added value in that section. But the ones where you can think, and it's also a good way, if you've had, say, 2 HRBP roles, you could then the duties that are different within each role. So that's a good way of reducing your CV down if there's repetition within them. So don't include them in every single job that you've had on just because they're for a different company. So it's just helpful with, you know, adding on these elaborating on the duties helps when recruiters or applicant tracking systems are the ones that are going through your CVs, and I'll come on to that later in terms of how you can avoid the bots and make sure a recruiter actually then can find your CV amongst the 250 that have applied in the 24 hours and just make it stand out a little bit more. So
that's great.
That one.
Thank you very much, Emma. That's super. Thank you. Okay, moving on then. So this over to Jennifer now to talk about building your an impactful social profile.
I think that no one's going to deny now that social media is going to play a role in recruitment, and your social media profile could be beneficial in finding you the next role or helping you secure an interview in the next role. Starting kind of, what do we mean by social media? Because I think a lot of people think LinkedIn when we're talking about recruitment, and actually in HR we probably are mostly talking about LinkedIn, but do think about your other social media channels as well. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, making sure that if those channels are professional channels, that you use them professionally and that you can use all the things I'm talking about here in those channels. If they're not professional channels and you don't want your next boss to see what you've got on them, lock them down. Put your privacy settings as secure as you can, because you don't want to be found for things that you don't want your boss seeing. So when we're talking about this, we're largely talking about LinkedIn, making that profile really work for you, making it really stand out, and putting yourself out there. And there's lots of statistics around significant numbers of jobs that aren't even advertised these days because people have already found their ideal candidate on LinkedIn, or already found their ideal candidate because they happen to know somebody. So being out there, being in the market is a great way of being able to make sure that you hear about the roles and that you get seen. To make sure that you get seen, make sure you've got a professional headshot. That's the first thing people are going to notice. So your headshot, it should be how you would turn up to an interview. It should show some personality. It should be smart, it should be professional. So it's not your summer holiday photos. It is something that you want your employer to see. On LinkedIn, and actually works on Facebook as well, you've got the headline or bio, they call it on things like Facebook, making sure that you use that. Now, that is searchable. So if you're looking for a role, make sure that you've got your headline showing what you're looking for and that you're available. We find that a lot of people put on LinkedIn their current job title. Well, that's what you'll be searched for. So let's say you're a HR administrator, you're looking for a HR advisor role. I've been making sure HR advisor is in that headline to make sure that people do search and find you for the role that you want. Your LinkedIn profile needs to match your CV. We've had some great advice from both Daryl and Emma about CVs, And exactly the same applies to your LinkedIn profile. And this is where LinkedIn does stand out from the rest, because clearly LinkedIn does have the ability to have your CV on there, but you can do so much more. So all the limitations you've got on a paper CV, you can break out from that on LinkedIn. So you can use things like showing that different parts of a role as actually separate roles, breaking them out, again, making yourself searchable for the skills that you've got, but absolutely, exactly as Emma's saying there, making sure that that is showing your achievement, showing the value that you add when you've got that in your profile, so people really do know what they're getting from you. And the same with the about section as well, making sure that really sells and shows your personality as well. That can jump out the page. That I've read some really good about sections where you can really get a feel for someone's personality. And I've certainly read ones and gone, right, yeah, that's somebody I want to employ. And even if they're not sort of looking for a job, but it's just somebody that kind of you can tell that their profile stands out, the personality, and they really are selling themselves. So do make sure it's something you can use to sell yourself. It is worth, if you can, try and get testimonials on LinkedIn. This is the hardest thing to do. People don't like giving testimonials. Give them and you're more likely to receive them. Get colleagues to give testimonials, because it doesn't have to be a manager. It can be a colleague, it can be a client, it can be somebody more junior than you. Anyone can give testimonials, so it's worth getting those. Getting people to endorse you for skills as well is really worth making use of those. You may find that managers are reluctant because of company policies around giving references, but if your manager's moved on, then it's ideal to ask them then, actually, no, you're not tied to company policies, can you put a personal reference for me on LinkedIn? LinkedIn gives you opportunities for evidence of work. You've got your featured snippets on there. Again, if you're using professionally Facebook, Instagram, again, these are the places where you should be showing off your work. You should be showing off what it is that you do. And clearly, for HR roles, it probably is going to be LinkedIn. More creative roles, obviously Instagram and Facebook. Tech roles, you're looking at things like GitHub and GitLab and those kind of profiles as well. So it does apply to across the board to all of those. And then connect with people. Go out there and just find the people that you might want to work for. Find the people that are in the roles you want to get to. Find the people that are managing the roles, maybe recruiting for the roles, and just connect far and wide, because that's how you'll hear about jobs. Certainly 4 years ago, I got a job based on the fact that somebody randomly shared a post on LinkedIn. They happened to work for the company I then went to go and work for. I didn't know that, didn't particularly know the person, but I saw the advert, perfect job, and it was all a bit of a coincidence. So it is worth browse LinkedIn. It's not a waste of time. And I think there's been some mentions there about job sections as well. There are the formal job sections, and they are worth looking at. And then once you've done all that, write, share, engage, show yourself off. There's no point being on LinkedIn. There's no point being on social media if you're going to sit in a corner and nobody's going to see you. You need to be out there. You need to be commenting on people's posts. Write articles, show your opinions on things. If you've got a blog, share your blog on LinkedIn, and just engage with people, engage in the conversation, because that's how you're going to get noticed. And that's also going to be part of your professional development as well. If you're finding yourself out of work at the moment and you want to keep up to date, keep your professional development, that's a really good way, just keeping those conversations and keep talking. So that's kind of my 5-minute slot done. It was a whistle stop tour. I have written a blog about this, so I will put the link to the blog in the chat if you want to find out a little bit more. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Okay, Pete, up to you now about reading the job advert and adapting your CV.
Brilliant. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you to the rest of the people who are speaking today. When reading the job advert and putting your CV and covering letter together, there are 2 big challenges. The first, as has been touched on already, is that your covering letter needs to be relevant, it needs to be engaging, and it needs to be informative. The second, to touch on something Daryl mentioned earlier, is there's not a lot of time to make your best impression. People will frequently spend less than a minute before deciding to put you on the reject pile. So how do we overcome those? I would suggest 3 R's: research, research, and reflect. The first, research. Take a look at that job advertisement critically. Read through what is it actually looking for. Think about the skills it's mentioning. Think about the keywords that are in there. But thinking a bit more critically, if you've got a job advertisement that mentions must be good at presentations, must be good at written reports, must be a good influencer, you know they're looking for communication. So you can try structuring both your covering letter and your CV to reflect that. So researching the actual company. The next step is the second R, which is to research the actual culture of that company. Go back 5 years, that may have been quite tricky, but now you've got quite a few things at your disposal to help you do that. There's firstly the company website. Secondly, we've got LinkedIn. We've then got the press, what's actually being reported about companies in the press. And then one of the ones which is a bit newer to the market, Glassdoor, is a fantastic website where employees can review the company, and it can really help you get an idea of the culture of a company. But why is the culture relevant? Well, earlier on, Amanda was talking about energizing strengths and how you can use them. We've also been talking about the jobs that you actually do want and the jobs that you do not want. The culture is a huge part of that, but importantly, it allows you to contextualize the job advertisement as well. So when you write your CV and covering letter, can you try to reflect that culture to show that you'll be a good fit as well? Then the third R is one of the most important ones. It's reflecting. And you'll need to take some time to reflect on how you fit the keywords that this job advertisement is asking for. And there's a great tool that I would recommend for doing this, which is a skills spreadsheet. Now, very simple. Set up a spreadsheet with 3 columns. When you're reading the job advertisements, when you're reading company culture documents, in the first column, simply jot down those keywords that come up. In the second column, you're going to start writing down how you match each of these keywords. What have you actually done? And then in the third column, what's the achievement been? Get some numbers in there, show that you can add value. Numbers are the language of business, so it allows people to see that you can have an impact. You've then got this one document that I would suggest building as a live document and keeping and adding to with every job that you look at. The reason is that once you've compiled and you're maintaining your skills spreadsheet, that means that you can use that to adapt your applications very quickly. A lot of people may sit around and think, well, I do know that I'm good at leading teams, but, and then you hit that mental blank where you can't remember the examples. Having a skills spreadsheet that lists keywords, lists how you fit them, and lists how you achieved with them is a great way to have that information at your fingertips and to be able to customize CVs nice and quickly. So when it actually comes to writing the covering letter and the CVs, we've had some excellent advice so far as well. Using this skills spreadsheet will allow you to very easily access that information in line with the suggestions that people have given us this afternoon already. The other things that I would add in the covering letter, try to show a degree of passion. It's great to say, I look forward to hearing from you, but recruiters have probably heard that phrase 20 times in the last hour. You might like to say, I would like to talk to you about this post. There's a bit more passion there. You could say, I would love to discuss this with you further. There's even more passion. You may even go as far as, I would live and breathe this job and love to show you how. But which is appropriate. That's why you've done the research around company culture earlier, so you know what to put in. I did compile these lists of do's and don'ts. For the sake of time, I won't go through them. They're on the screen. I know they're going to be sent out afterwards. But for me, these are the 7 salient do's and 7 salient don'ts of this. But my key takeaway would be build a skilled spreadsheet, maintain it, and it will be your best friend. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Pete. I like the sound of that. Okay, back to Jennifer now for language in adverts. What attracts and what repels?
This is an interesting one, and I normally speak about this from kind of the other side, talking to employers about their employer brand, how they write job adverts, the impact of those job adverts. So I'm going to talk to you about that just to show you what's out there and what actually you might be skipping over when you're reading an advert, and actually might be able to sit back and say, well, actually, I could potentially go for that role, or I might have disregarded that role and perhaps I shouldn't have done. And this goes back to some research that's been done around language in job adverts and how it impacts particularly gender. So LinkedIn, there was a LinkedIn study, for example, that said that the word aggressive puts off 44% of women from applying for a role, and actually still interestingly puts off a third of men as well. So there's language within job adverts that can put off people from applying. So you may find that as when you're reading adverts, whether you're male, whether you're female, and statistically this does tend to impact women more than it does men. But as we've seen there, a third of men are also put off by the word aggressive. You may find yourself being put off unnecessarily of adverts that are badly using language. Now, if I was speaking to a company about this and we're talking about employer brands and we're talking about how we write those adverts, obviously we'd be thinking about changing that language, and we'd be thinking about how the impact that language has. And clearly we've seen, or you may have seen, a lot of work around language, particularly in the tech industry, following the Black Lives Matter movements and predominance that we've had during the summer, and language around kind of master and slave and that sort of thing being taken out of the tech industry, because this kind of language are barriers to diversity. So ideally, companies wouldn't be using that kind of language. Companies wouldn't be using language that is barriers to diversity, but unfortunately they do. And unfortunately, this type of language is often used in adverts. Interestingly, a company, Atlassian, again, a tech company, saw an increase in female applicants of 80% by simply changing the wordings of their adverts to use language that is more suitable to females and is more females are more likely to resonate with. So, for example, terms like ambitious and persistent are seen as very masculine words. Words like leadership also, whereas words like support can be more feminine, and are therefore you're going to attract a wider pool of candidates. And of course, interestingly as well, it's not just a case of, well, put aggressive in an advert and we'll get men applying, we won't get women. Of course it's not. But obviously the wider that you write your adverts, the more that a company will attract a wider pool of applicants. And of course we should all know as HR professionals the benefits of diversity, and clearly that's a discussion for another session. But it is really worth being aware when you're reading job adverts. Be aware of the language in them. Be aware that if you disregard something and go, well, that's not for me. I mean, I know for me personally, if I see something that says work hard, play hard, I'm pretty much almost certainly turn the page, not interested. The culture doesn't sound right for me. And that may be true. It may be a culture that's not right for you. So if there is language, if you are looking at a job advert and thinking, well, yeah, I would disregard that, the language isn't great. When you're preparing your questions for interview, make sure that when you go into that interview, you're asking questions about the culture, because what you're trying to establish then is, are these red flags in the advert because they should be there, and actually this isn't a culture that's ready for diversity, because unfortunately there are company cultures that aren't, and you may want to be aware of that before you go into that culture. But on the flip side, you may find that this is just a badly worded advert. This is the same advert that's been sort of reprinted over the last 20 years, and nobody's thought just to reflect and look at how the language should have been adapted, look at how they can change the language. And of course, one of the things, and I certainly know it's years ago that I did internal recruitment and actually wrote adverts, but it's it's kind of a marketing role, and as HR professionals, I think often we're not equipped for that kind of marketing. And certainly over the years, I know that I've sort of become more aware and understanding about marketing in recruitment and how that works. I think often adverts are written by people that aren't marketing professionals, and companies will leave it to kind of HR or leave it to the recruiting manager instead of getting marketing involved in writing really well worded adverts. So just be aware when you're looking for adverts, you're looking for roles. Why am I disregarding this? And could I potentially be one of those people that goes, do you know what? I know that word is putting me off, but actually I'm going to try for it anyway. And I'll at the interview, I'll ask questions. I'll find out about the culture, and it may be that I find that there's a big red flag and I don't want to go there. But at least you've put yourself kind of in the ring, and we can see that there are many adverts that are wrongly putting people off, and that might be your chance to get the ideal job that others just aren't applying for.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And now one last session, back to Emma to talk about applicant tracking systems. You need to unmute yourself there.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so with applicant tracking systems, I'm sure, especially with the larger companies, that you've all uploaded, and it's so off-putting because some of them, they'll even come up with times that how long it'll take you to upload, and yeah, it's you either end up losing interest or you just think it's just not worth the aggravation, and it becomes very depersonalized. But yeah, looking into this, I know from our read.co.uk, we put on criteria questions, and basically the ones that haven't met the criteria, unfortunately, we don't look at the CVs if you've not ticked yes to both of the criteria questions, or you know, if we put 3 or 4 on, because we know from the client has said they absolutely have to have those set criteria. So just bear in mind that if it's not got that criteria, you probably are wasting your time a little bit. But yeah, the stats looking into it, apparently 75% of applications through an ATS do not even get viewed by human eyes. So this is for a multitude of reasons, and not necessarily because you aren't the right fit and because you've not met the criteria. There are other reasons. So a way to get around of this, the big one is, I know they look prettier, but PDFs, I'm sure Daryl will agree with me that PDFs are the bane of recruiters' lives, because we legally have to remove contact details, and for data protection issues, we've got to remove all sorts of, you know, a lot of the time we are meant to even take out the dates of education, because these are all ways that people could discriminate against you, whether it's positively or negatively. But yeah, technically we're supposed to remove them. So then a PDF with the non-editable, or if they are editable, we have to put it in a converter, and then the CV looks a complete mess, and you've made it look so beautiful. And the recruiter then has to come back to you to say, can we have it on Word? So PDFs, they do not go through applicant tracking systems very well for the exact same issue. They get scrambled, the words and paragraphs can end up out of order, so by the time the client's actually seeing your CV, it wouldn't look anything like what you've tried to upload. So rule of thumb, just try and use a Word document, so whether you're emailing it directly through or uploading it, yeah, please, it'll save us all a lot of time. Agree, they do look a lot prettier though. So, and again, I think with the data protection side of things, people don't want people messing with the layout, and I understand that as well. But if you have kept all that, you know, like Daryl said about taking off the address, it shouldn't matter too much that they are editable. The other thing, minimize graphics and fancy templates. Again, I think unless you are a graphic designer or in that sort of industry, again, it just has, we get quite often ones that are split down into, you know, 3 columns, and they look beautiful, but we literally have to take them all apart. And it's not because we are rewriting the CV, it's because they have to go onto a generic template, or a lot of our clients, we have to send forward anonymous CVs so they can't come through to show that they've come from Reed, because it's meant to be a generic PSL, a preferred supply list, so they can't show favoritism. So again, just word all the way. Same applies for contact information in headers and footers. Apparently the ATSs don't work very well when pulling that through, and it gets lost. So if the recruiter, the client, is then trying to find your contact details to get in touch, they might not be able to find them with ease. So you again might lose out. Keywords and essential skills. So find 3 job descriptions that you think you're suitable for, and look for recurring words, expressions, turns of phrases on there. So it could be, it could be application tracking system. So just think about those words if they're coming up frequently, and make sure that you're peppering them through your CV. So you can even go as far as running your own job description through an app like Wordle, and it'll tell you the most frequent words on there. Apply that to your CV, it will then come up as the top search in an applicant tracking. You'll come up as being the most relevant and the most suitable for that job. So, you know, you'll always find the words, and it probably will be things like health and safety, or L&D, or whatever it is. It will be the standard HR ones probably, but it's just worth seeing if there's any that you've not got on your CV, and putting them in as many times as you can without it looking like overkill. Length of experience as well. Some applicant tracking systems, if the recruiter's put in they've got to have a minimum of 5 years, it will literally try and pull that information through. So if you've not got specific lengths of time as well, that can also work against you. With the abbreviations and acronyms as well, make sure that you use both, because a recruiter might just search on HR, but you might get another recruiter that will just search on human resources. So putting in both will give you the best chance of not being missed out, because I don't know whether everybody will have heard of Boolean searching, but again, it depends if the recruiter's good enough to realise that they've got to put in multiple terms of phrases to pick up everybody. So you'll have to take that responsibility yourself, to not just to put L&D, to put learning and development within the CV, so you're not being screened out. And again, duplicate the language that's been used within the job description. So if you've got that you've screened candidates as part of an interview process, they might have put that they're looking for somebody that's done applicant compliance. So again, just make sure you're trying to mirror. It is nice to have a couple of different CVs, but I'm not suggesting you do a different CV every single time you apply for a job, but just putting in that due diligence and double checking that you've not used that jargon and you're matching their jargon will just help you get through. Because whether it's a recruiter, we essentially do, on an applicant tracking system do as well, we just skim read and look for those keywords and phrases that we know are on the job description. And again, the suitability questions, they are your absolute key. If you can't answer yes to the questions at the bottom of the job description, it'll be a bit of a long shot for you as well. So those suitability questions, make sure they are in your CV, because sometimes I know people just assume and think, oh, they'll make that leap and know I've got that system or whatever it is. But yeah, just make sure it's in your CV, because if you've ticked yes and it's not in your CV, again, you might get discounted. But that's it from me in a nutshell.
That's great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Okay, well, we're a little bit over time. We've got a few minutes left, but if you can stay online, I'm sure we can for another 5 or 10 minutes. So questions from anybody. Let's ask, we've had a few come up, I think. So Dawn, any in particular that you wanted to
Yeah,
share?
Susan's asked, lots of temp positions. How do you present these confidently, and how do you demonstrate a wealth of skills from different industries that you've gained through your temp positions? So I'm guessing that's probably Emma or Daryl that wants to take that.
I don't mind doing that one, Daryl. If you can obviously add to it as well.
Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily a bad thing at all. So don't think like we've always, especially over the last couple of years, how it's been. We've been really temp short because everybody was employed. It's a great thing. We get a lot of career temps. I'd recommend if you've got a lot of similar roles, you could just put either various temp roles and then just give an overview and block it all together. If they've been quite different and you've got lots of gaps in it, maybe then break them down individually, and just put a little paragraph above it, above the time limits, explaining what you've been doing in those times, and why you were doing temp roles. Quite often as well, if you've ended up in a temp role for a couple of weeks and it's gone on for quite a long time as well, that's great, because to keep temps, people don't always like keeping them because they are an extra cost. So if they have kept you, it showed real value. Daryl, have you got any other spin on that one?
Yeah, so I think it's a case of, depending on how many roles, it varies for every individual, but I like to see, even if they have only been a month at a time, the company you work for, the industry, and just 1 or 2 key bullet points on it, you can keep this slim enough. And if it has been the past 2 years of your working career, have a page on your CV for that. No one will mind seeing the experience you've done and the difference of roles. It shows that you can come in and hit the ground running more than likely than someone, the permanent employer that's been at their organisation for 20 years, So you can use it to your advantage, get the industries you've worked, the systems you've used, your achievements that you've done. Don't look at it as a bad thing if you've got a page and it's full of temp roles. Sometimes we can overthink this. People in general, we overthink things and think, oh, they're not going to like to see that. Well, actually, no, we do like to see it. And especially if you're going for a temp role, they want to see that you can hit the ground running. I've got someone starting a role on Monday and the organisation hasn't even met this individual. She's been working for the past 3 years in temp positions, but because they know of the organisation she's worked at, they feel from the references that I've got for them as well that she can come in and hit the ground running without even meeting them. And not every company's going to be like that, but there are a lot that will see the tempness as a real good thing.
Okay, thank you both of you. There's one more question from Michelle, which is about how do you demonstrate when you've got concurrent roles? So one might be a voluntary role, might have your own business plus you're working as well. And I'd like to say thank you to Giles, who's also from the CIPD, who's given some information on this, and his take on this was profile your role that has been your most sort of professional, then secondary role, and then maybe a voluntary role at the bottom. But I'll put that out again to Emma and Daryl to see if they've got any other advice other than what Giles has given us.
Absolutely agree with Giles. Leaving the voluntary positions till the end, unless it's really relevant for the job that you're applying for and you want to get that at the start of your CV. If you're running your own business and part-time you've been working somewhere else, you can say that. People can work these things out. They can see the dates. So put them on. But typically, if it's a board position, a local governor, or some work that you've been doing, or I don't like using this word, but when people talk about side hustles, if it's a side hustle or side business, keep them at the bottom if they're not too relevant for the roles that you're applying for. Agree with what Joel says.
Yeah, totally.
Lightly.
Yeah, just whether it's relevant to the job role is its prominence, really. Again, if it is relevant, have it at the top running alongside. If it's not, at the bottom.
Michelle's just said all 3 are relevant to the roles that I would be looking for. So yeah, keep them all together at the top, one after the other, whichever one you've been doing most recently.
Yeah, and just put a line in to say that they're running concurrently.
Yeah, absolutely. There was another question I see popped up. I'm not sure who it was, but it said about having a career break and whether to include that in the CV. Absolutely. Don't leave a potential employer second guessing what you've been doing for 2 years. If it purely is a career break and you've been traveling or you've been doing renovations at home, or you just generally wanted to put something in there, but there will be skills that you can put in, whether it was project managing a build, whatever it may be. Just let the employer know that you've had that break. Otherwise, I think, has she been job searching for 2 years? Why hasn't she got a job? You don't want them to question it. Don't leave them second guessing.
I think that's important as well if you're going into an industry where safer recruitment is key. They don't like gaps on your CV. So yeah, make sure to explain it. I don't think there's any other questions. Amanda, back to you.
So it just leaves me to thank our speakers once again for their time. Thank you very much, everybody, and to wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.